I want to give a special shout out to my patrons, my Bibliosbrand, my Bibliosworn, and my Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means so much to me. Hi everyone, welcome to my next conversation with authors, and today we have Ryan Cahill, the author behind the Bound and the Broken series, a fantastic self-published fantasy series. And this is the first time Choco joined the interview. Hi Ryan. What's
hey,
up, man?
Choco. Oh, I'm Petrik. Hey, Petrik. Yeah.
Choco. Did you just say hi to Choco, not me?
Priorities.
Okay. That's fair.
Priorities.
That's fair.
Look at him.
Yeah, I think he's kind of bored here.
I'm already feeling unprofessional. I'm just like, look at the dog.
Okay, so just to get things started, can you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, it sounds weird for me. I'm Ryan Cahill, not Ryan Cahill, just Ryan Cahill. But you can also call me Ryan Cahill if you're English or from the UK or from anywhere else that isn't Ireland, because people seem to have an issue pronouncing the name. I'm the author of the Bound and the Broken series. Blood and Fire was my debut, which I released 15 months ago. And it's been a bit crazy since then.
Wow, that is insane. 14 months.
Yep.
Yeah. And since then, you have released 2 books, 2 main novels, and 2 novellas. Impressive.
just about 500,000 published words now.
500,000?
Which is nuts, yeah.
Wow, that is crazy, man. Seriously.
I know. Trust me, I'm aware.
Seriously.
I'm aware.
So what was your inspiration at first to finally create the Bound and the Broken series? And I think a lot of people have kind of agreed that this kind of works as an adult fantasy version of Aragon, and also like it combined a lot of classic fantasy trope that work really well in modern narrative.
Yeah, I suppose like I have a lot of different inspirations because I don't have like this is the first book. Blood and Fire was the first book I've ever written. So I kind of took a lot of inspiration from everything I've read over the years as we go. And it's always interesting for me when people make the comparison with Aragon, because I did love Aragon as a kid, but a lot of my dragon lore and stuff, and a lot of the reason I love dragons wasn't Aragon. It was actually more Her Majesty's Dragon, Naomi Novik's whole Temeraire series, and also Anne McCaffrey, Dragon Riders of Pern. Now, I did like Aragon, but it was very much when I was younger. So as I kind of was a bit older, that was more of the impact on that for me. But then obviously, like you've mentioned it a few times, John Gwynn's books were massive for me. I would say, like from a craft perspective, John Gwynn is definitely my biggest influence. I would say. I think even if I look at John's writing, calling him John seems strange, Mr. Gwynn. If I look at his writing, I can definitely see a lot of the similarities. I think in Hunger of the Gods, like the Bloodsworn saga, I think he goes a different way. His writing style changes a little bit, but it's just as fantastic as it always is.
And I think I can kind of notice that because I just finished reading Of Darkness and Light and also the Exile in a row.
Very quickly. Actually, I wasn't expecting the Exile to be done so soon.
So I just kind of needed that because it's about Dane. Yeah, and I think these 2 books, especially these 2 books, is where I think I can definitely see the John Gwynn's inspiration, especially in the battle scenes. Yeah. So would you consider that he is one of your favorite authors?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, John Gwynn is 100% one of my favorite authors. I'm trying to see all of my bookshelves over here, and it would be do better if I had it in the background. But I've just started my new bookshelf because I moved continent. And I'm trying to. So all my normal older classic inspirational books aren't all there. But John Gwynn's books are there because I needed to have them. But I love the book so much. I'm trying to look over. Yeah, most of the stuff there I actually haven't even read. It's all new stuff. But John Gwynn's the only author on my bookshelf in New Zealand that I've actually read. Because all my other stuff's been Kindle because it's harder to get the books over here.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, you are moving continents.
Yeah. Now I think I always say that from like a world building perspective, and cast of characters perspective, it would always be Robert Jordan and then also Tolkien, who are probably my biggest inspirations. I think it's easy to see, and I know when I was creating the world, I've just always loved, like everyone, elves and dwarves, and I've kind of want to put my own spin on them, and you'll see that when we come into the next few books as different parts of the cultures will come in. But it's just something that's always been there for me. And then with dragons, it would be like Anne McCaffrey and Naomi Novik. And then definitely from a writing craft perspective, I'd say it's Jordan and Gwyn have been two of my biggest. I think a lot of people compare me to Gemmell, but I actually haven't read Gemmell.
Oh, Gemmell?
Yeah, I've never read Gemmel, and I just get a lot of reviews. So which
well,
is always fun.
Gemmel is very well known for his heroic fantasy, so I think that's probably why.
I'd say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's always funny when people compare you, and you're like,
yeah.
haven't read it yet, but okay.
Thankfully, you didn't mention Abru that inspired me.
That's the only negative review that I've ever laughed at. Because it's so bad and so like almost dramatically, theatrically bad.
I was so pissed, man. I was so pissed.
Fantastic.
So this is your first epic fantasy series, and I mean, starting from Of Darkness and Light, there is a lot of threads, there is a lot of characters, and I'm
feeling that now.
Yeah, and I think many readers can kind of like now find their new favorites characters now in the series. And for me, as I mentioned, it is Dane, right? Dane Atreus. And who are your favorite characters to write?
I think sometimes, and I do have favorite characters to write, and it's interesting because, you know, my sense of humor, I don't always put it into different characters because I feel like I could throw it into, if you throw it into every character, it kind of becomes diluted. I think you'll see my humor in the characters of Belina. And sometimes in Dan as well. And I've crafted them almost Dan to be more like the irritating younger brother, whereas Belina to be kind of the older, matured version. And then in Falman as well, who is the Windrunner Navigator, you can see his kind of sense of humor too. So I really enjoy writing. I enjoy writing Dane a lot. I really enjoy writing Dane. I enjoy writing Belina. I enjoy writing Cahill too. I like that journey from the kind of that naive, the naivety and heroic aspect, and trying to keep the kind of keep the noble aspect of his character while having him understand that everything that is heroic historically isn't always noble. And I do like doing that. And I like actually, who's another favorite? I enjoy writing Tarman. He has a couple of point of view chapters in Of Darkness and Light, and it was really interesting for me to jump into his head and write there, because he was new to me from a point of view. So that was really fun.
And considering that there are a lot of characters, you have begun writing novellas, right? But the first one is The Fall, and the second one is The Exile. And The Exile focus on Dane, and also Belina is introduced there. I love her, by the way. Belina.
Did you know she's also in book 2 and book 1?
What? Really?
Yeah, I love when people do that. So in book 1, she has a scene, you know, when they're in the feast tent after the proving, and there's a bard who's singing at the back of the tent.
Okay.
That's her. And she's introduced by name and everything.
Oh my God, I completely forgot.
Yeah. And then, but loads of people don't notice that. And then also, but in Of Darkness and Light, Dallin, and this is the reason why you probably forgot, is because Dallin, who's, I know chapters you weren't your favorite, he has, Belina is actually with him in Of Darkness and Light. So she's there for his last 3 chapters, and he gets introduced to her. And she's probably, even a lot of people who didn't like Dallin's story in book 2, their favorite chapters were the 3 chapters at the end with Belina.
How come I didn't notice that?
I love that when I go back and I can see that, because I always ask that when people have read The Exile. It's like, you realize she was in it from book 1. Most people know she's in book 2, but book 1 is always one that slips by.
Oh, it's so weird. No wonder that I kind of feels like I have known her, but also can't be sure about it.
But it can be hard as well. I was checking. There's like over 100 something named characters.
Yeah, there is a lot now. There's a
lot of named characters, a lot of story threads, and like I know I'm writing book 3 right now, and it was a conscious decision for me in book 1 to stick mostly to Cahill, because I knew that when I was writing book 1 that I didn't have the skill to write that many POVs. So I wanted to do it. The plan was always to do it in book 2, but I wanted to write more first. So that was great. When I wrote The Fall afterwards, I got to do 4 different perspectives, and I was learning to kind of get different characters' voices, and then I found it easier when I went to book 2 to kind of expand it out more.
And by writing novellas, do you ever feel like this steals into your writing time for your novels?
Yes, it definitely does. And it's part of, I planned to have basically like one novella in between each book. So it's like book, novella, book, novella, book, novella. And that was the plan. And I still plan on releasing those novellas but like I know that book 3 would be out sooner this year if I hadn't written the Exile. And financially, the novellas aren't massive because they don't link into the series on like Amazon page as well. But this series is, it's a passion for me too. So I want the book there, regardless of whether it makes me a lot of money compared to a novel. I want it there. But I might have to push the novellas a little bit to kind of focus on the main series to keep that kind of turning.
But I think in a way, the novellas kind of work superbly because by reading the fall first, people are interested to get to the main novels.
Be careful because whether to read the fall first or after Blood and Fire is a big thing. And there's arguments on the Discord server all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I actually had to make a page that has 2 different preferential reading orders that's now in all of the books to stop the arguments. And it still hasn't stopped the arguments.
Why?
It's a good problem to have. But,
yeah, I guess so. But I think from my perspective, I think both of them work well as a starting point, both of them. So you can just kind of choose if you're watching this and you haven't started the series, you can kind of choose whether you want to start from The Fall or of Blood and Fire here.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I wrote The Fall that way on purpose. I wrote it so that people can have an access for free to the series, so they can go on a website, get it for free, and they don't have to pay to see if they like my style. But then also I wanted it to be an extra bonus for people who read A Blood and Fire as like a thank you for reading A Blood and Fire. So I wrote it so that it should be able to be read either way. Just whichever one you read first gives the other one more context.
So, yeah, especially for Kalinvar. I love Kalinvar.
That's another one. I love writing his chapters as well.
Yeah, he's a great character. And speaking of, because you probably have planned this to be a 4 or 5 book series, right? So are you a planner or a pantser when it comes to writing?
I've always shied away from that question because I think everybody's a bit of both. So I think people take pride in being pantsers. They're like, I'm completely a pantser. But the way I look at it is, as someone who pantses the book, they never pants the book and then just release it. You pants it, and then usually a pantser has a heavier editing process than a planner because the planner has a bit more spots that they've preordained. Things are going to go in different places. My English doesn't always work. That's why I have an editor. But I think for me, the pantser's first draft is like a really extensive outline. So from a certain perspective, a pantser is an extreme plotter. Depending how you look at it. For me, I can't just sit down and pants a novel from start to finish because I think I almost get a really deep imposter syndrome because I have no idea where the story's going. And for me, it needs to be going somewhere. So usually what I will do is I'll always know the last line. So I'll know the last line before I start. And then always I know what the last scene will be in the book, and I know the last line that will be spoken. So I always have that, and then I'll kind of just have things that I know need to happen. So if I'm going to get from A to B, these events need to happen. And then that's as far as I will plan usually. When I go to write a chapter, I'll usually have a few notes of what I want from the chapter, like what tone and mood the chapter needs to be, and what kind of emotional state the characters in the scene are in, and what I want from it. But I'll never go down to like a conversational level. I'll say they need a conversation about this, but then I'll just write the conversation. So it is kind of a bit of both. Like I'll plan a general idea, but I like to be free when I do it.
I know what you mean. And I think
even sorry, go ahead.
No, I think I can kind of agree with that. I think people, for example, like when they speak about Sanderson, because Sanderson is mostly a planner, right?
Man.
Yeah, and
he needs to be.
Yeah, he needs to be. But I think at the end there is still a lot of pantsing done to his books.
If there isn't, look at it this way. I was talking to another author, Christopher Russell, earlier today. And we're talking about Sanderson. And I was saying Sanderson, to me, is the single most imaginative, commercially successful author in the world. And if you think about it, he wrote a book about magic crabs with crystal hearts in a world that's overseen by slivers of gods, and it's absolutely nuts. It's a fucking insane. if you boil his books down to bare bones, they are just bonkers. If someone gave you the like an elevator pitch, 100-foot crabs fight guys in magical misting armor. You're like, no, that's not a book. He's a different level. Sanderson is, and whatever anyone says about his writing style, his execution of incredibly imaginative things is unrivaled. As far as I'm concerned.
He's insane, man. He's insane. He's successful for a good reason. And speaking of successful, you're kind of considered as a successful self-published fantasy authors now. A lot of people, I think, kind of look up to you, especially new self-published fantasy authors starting up. And do you have tips? I know that I'm pretty sure that a lot of authors have asked you about this, but do you have some of the biggest tips for those who wants to start self-publishing?
Well, like, for basic stuff, I do have an article on self-published fantasy month, which outlines a few things that I wished I knew when I started. And if you type that in to the Google on the line, like Ryan Cahill, things I wish I knew when I started, or self-published fantasy month, it'll come up. And then also the interview that I did with Library of a Viking was mostly around that, and a few different bits and tips. And for me, like, I think the two biggest ones for me are write. Or three. I think there's three core ones. If I was to boil it down and you put a gun to my head, I would say, firstly, just write the book, get the book written, because people are worried about stuff and the book isn't even written. So write the book, and I think everyone will say that as like a really quick cop-out answer. You need to write. You need to write. The second one is attitude. And I think, I don't mean attitude as in whether you're nice or whether you're mean. I mean, if you want self-publishing to be a career, you need to take a certain attitude. So I think for me, from the very start, I said, I don't know if this will ever make me any money, but I want it. It's a dream. And if I want to be an author full time, I need to treat it like that. I need to treat it like a business while also it being my passion. So I need to set myself up that way and gear myself that way and think about it as if I'm the publisher and really work that way. And then also understanding that when you're on social media, and like, I know for me, like, I don't have personal Twitter or Instagram, but I understand that everything I say and do on Instagram and Twitter is me. It's my brand. If someone sees me saying something on Twitter, they'll associate that with me as an author.
Exactly.
And I think that attitude and that mindset, and then how you treat people, like even me and you, like when I messaged you the first time, like I didn't know what to do when you messaged your reviewer, but just, take the time, have that good, positive attitude. If you're messaging a reviewer, look through the books they like. Take the time. If you expect them to take the time to read your book, take the time to learn who they are and if they would like your book. Which I think is a big thing. And I think that the third one for me is kind of ties into the idea of business is professionalism, which most people do have, but I don't mean it like that. I mean, I've seen a lot of lovely people and fantastic authors who write great books, but then you'll see things like book covers, and I've seen a couple, but there's loads. There's loads of amazing book covers in indie fantasy and in indie writing in general now. But I see a lot in like Facebook groups and things where people go, "Oh, my book isn't selling. How come?" And you go and you look at the cover, and I think for me, these are the clear ones. You'll see these immediately. If you had have taken the time and taken that cover and gone to Amazon and looked at all the top ranking books in that genre and put that cover next to them, you can just see that the professionalism isn't the same. And that's the big thing for me with covers. People talk about beautiful covers, talk about on-brand covers, on-trend covers. For me, a book cover doesn't need to be beautiful. Its most important thing is to be on-brand, but with professionalism. It needs to look the part. You need to be able to line it up next to the other covers and not be able to tell the difference. And I think that's what I mean by professionalism. At the risk of it sounding weird, but I think those three things for me, very much are that kind of your mindset and that idea of professionalism in what you do, like making sure you're going through that copy editor, taking your time on your content. This is the book you've worked, 10 years, 2 years, whatever amount of time on. It's your passion. Like, take the time and polish it and invest in it what you can. Not everybody has the money. Put everything you can into it.
This is kind of like what Philip C. Crenshaw, you know him, right? Philip C.
Yeah. I don't know him personally, but I know all of his books, and I've seen him online quite a lot.
Yeah, he sold a lot of books in self-publishing. Insane. Like,
yes.
I think
so. He's a successful author. I'm just trying to get there.
Oh, you will get there. You will get there. So he has, I think, sold about 700,000 books now. And
not surprised.
Yeah, and the biggest increase that he said that caused this increase in sales is his cover art. Because back then the cover art wasn't as good. He used a cliche cover and kind of like stock art, understandably, because he probably didn't have the means yet back then. But after he moved to Chris McGrath, who did the cover art, things changed insanely for him.
I would say now it's more important to get the cover art right the first time, because I think and I think Philip or Phil, I don't know, I feel strange calling him Phil when I don't actually know him, but I think he's perfectly right, and those covers are amazing. I love the covers. I think Amazon's algorithms were a lot more forgiving for reviving sales of books years ago. Whereas, if you get me, so what I mean is, if you have a bad cover now, or bad objectively, a cover that doesn't work, and you don't have a lot of sales, it's a lot harder. If I just get a brilliant cover and put it on, it's a lot harder to drive those sales upwards, even with that cover, because there's so much competition on the website now that they're not waiting for you. They'll just feed someone else. Whereas I think previously it wasn't easy, but it was easier. If you replaced that cover and did a few things, you could start to tweak those sales and tweak that algorithm a little bit. I think it's a bit less forgiving now. I think actually that's another fourth point for what to do, research. I think that's one of the biggest lacking things in all indie publishing at the minute is market research. People going and actually taking a few months to check that out.
And from my perspective, I mean, as a reader right now, it is so insane. So many self-published fantasy books being released, and so many of them are looking good. I mean, compared to, let's say, like 5 or 6 years ago, things weren't as crazy as it is now. It is crazy.
In indie fantasy, I can't speak for other areas of indie publishing just because I'm not active in them, but I assume it's the same. But indie fantasy in particular, I think, has taken leaps and bounds, like absolutely massive steps. And now, saying that as well, I feel like when you're on Twitter and you're in certain communities, I think I might be ignorant to other aspects of indie fantasy, because obviously there's thousands and thousands of books being published, hundreds at least every single day, that I never see. So, if I'm in certain circles with certain authors, I will always see their books and their covers. So I will always assume that's the baseline for how everything is done, and it might not be. But I know I have seen some crazy, beautiful covers coming through soon in the last while, and so amazing books. I'm genuinely the gap, or what used to be, I suppose, the perceived gap between traditional fantasy and indie fantasy now, to me, is a blurred line.
Yeah, same.
Like it really is.
I agree.
Yeah.
I remember that I mean, on my booktube channel, sometimes I talk about cover art, right? And then I remember someone told me that, but I'm reading only ebooks, cover art don't matter. Oh, believe me, it does.
It does, yeah.
It does.
Yeah, it massively, massively matters. I think the way, and that's why I talked about professionalism earlier, because I think covers don't matter to a point for ebooks, all right? But I think it's that if you have an amazing cover, it might not matter.
Yeah.
But if you have a bad cover, it matters.
Yeah.
So, if you have an amazing cover next to 100 other amazing covers, it might not set you apart from those covers. But if you have a bad cover, or an objectively unprofessional cover that looks like it's not very high quality, that will set you apart in a bad way immediately. So the good one might not always help, but the bad one will hurt you.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah. And speaking of cover art, are you involved in the cover art creation process of your books, all of them?
Yeah. So I have a fantastic designer who works on my books, Stuart Bache. He has a company called Books Covered. He's brilliant, a really, really, really nice guy, lovely guy, and just does some. He's really one of my favorite things when it comes to cover artists. He's really genre aware and trend aware, and he knows what's working and what isn't working. He does all the covers for Mark Dawson, who's a massive indie author in the thriller scene. I would usually give Stuart a brief, and he'll come back to me nice and quickly. He's kind of, I'll say, look, take this. I want it this way. Like, I want like a dragon doing this. And my covers, because he's already created the first cover, the kind of the brand is already there, and he created the brand, not me. Like Stuart, this is his image, and he's like, okay, perfect. Now I make the covers for Stuart has a company called Cover Kit where they give out stock images, and I use the background from that. So I'll make the novella covers just because, you know, I don't make so much money off novellas. I give the fall away for free, so it's just easier for me, and I have quite a lot of experience doing design for different areas and different things, so I'm comfortable with it, and I've taken a lot of time. Some of the initial covers for the fall were horrific, but I waited until it was at a certain level. But even at that, I still won't do the covers for the main books. That's completely Stu, not me.
Weirdly, I actually really love the cover of the Exile.
Yeah, because that's actually, so the way that's done is the actual image on the front, the symbol is a custom illustration drawn by my brother. So that's used as the chapter icon in Darkness and Light. So and it's Dane's chapter icon. So we took that and then manipulated that in Photoshop to kind of carry off on the cover.
Oh my god, that scene though, regarding the wyverns in the second book, so damn cool. No spoilers. I'm just saying that there are wyverns in Dane's chapters.
there's gonna be a lot of shit from the midway on to the end of the third book. That's gonna be like, yeah.
And I definitely can see that because with Of Darkness and Light and also the Exile, there's a lot of things that's looking forward to converge in the third book. So
there's still pieces to come together in the first third of the third book, just people to get into the right places. But I think from about a third through, maybe like a half through to the end is
So
it's not written yet, that section, but I have it. It's all there, and I'm like slogging through getting this part done to get to the part that I really want to get, and then that's always the way though.
So do you find it hard right now to write Of War and Wind?
Yeah, I am. It's probably the first time that I've struggled. And I think it's more from the fact that for the last 14 months, I haven't stopped once. So I haven't taken a break at all. It's just been nonstop. Even at the minute, I'm writing 7 days a week, 7 hours a day at least, usually more. So yeah, I think at the minute it's just, you know, it's there and I see it. But I think a lot of people, a lot of authors in particular, who've kind of approach things like burnout and stuff, that it's just harder to write. Just you sit there some days and the words just don't come out. And especially I have the deadline in December, so I think sometimes when you have that deadline, you're worried, oh, am I going to meet it? Is it going to be the right quality if I meet it? But I'm after coming back into a good space now, and I think the good thing is that I do write fast. So I think even this slow period for me is still quite good. Like it's still at about 125,000 words already now. So it's coming along. The only problem is I think it's going to be a longer book than book 2. So
speaking of writing fast, so do you ever struggle with, for example, characterizations, plotting, world building, or maybe action scenes? I mean, you kind of excel at all of them right now, but do you struggle in any of them?
I think like writing for me is really mood based, and really how I'm feeling. Like I think there's one thing that I love. I love writing action scenes. I actually have to stop myself from writing so many of them sometimes because I know you can't have them. Having an action scene for the sake of an action scene, it doesn't work. And I think it's one thing that I learned from John Gwynn's writing is that what makes an action scene enjoyable isn't the action. It's the emotion the character feels during the action. And it's also, and sometimes people always confuse the feeling with just emotion, but it's sensory. So like for me, you know, if for instance like a Bloodsworn, if Orca grabs the corner of the shield and she can feel the metal and the leather, and that brings you into the scene. And I love those things. I love writing them. I'll put on like an epic music YouTube playlist. I'll put this volume on full on my headphones. I'll just sit there and type. I think sometimes with like characterization, especially with so many POV shifts for me, because I write linearly. So I know some authors who will have, say, 5 points of view, and they'll write one character's whole story, and then another character's whole story, and then they'll bring them together. But I can't do that because I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes when I write, basically the way it's done now, what I'm finding with Of War and Ruin, is that every decision, even sometimes just the response to a question that one character has here, affects this character. And so I can't do it that way because it's too difficult to piece them together. And I think I miss some of the complexities. Whereas if I write linearly, then those things that affect the next character I can write in the next scene, and I can do that, and it works better for me. But the trade-off is I don't always have the characterization right when I'm writing, so I do a lot of that sometimes in editing. So sometimes I'll be writing what should happen in the scene. You know, say for instance, one of my favorites who I forgot about earlier is Farda. He's one of my favorites to write, and he's a product of Pantsing, because when I wrote him initially, he was just a captain on the ship, and then he flipped a coin, and all of a sudden about 500 years of history flooded into my head, and then I stopped and I went aside, and that was that. I started writing him, but I think sometimes the complexity of his relationship with Ella, and that's what I want to see as we go through the books. And I think that's what makes Ella's story better as well, is because there's a complexity to the relationship they have. And I know you know it too, in that there's things that have happened that she doesn't know about. And the amount of, I actually get emails. I get emails putting them together in a relationship. And I'm like, you know what he did. This could not happen.
Well, exactly. That's what made it so interesting.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I have to write what's meant to happen in the scene, but then when I edit, I then have to, what I do when I edit usually this pass is I will go to the side, I'll make a note, and I'll start, and I will describe things about Farda. And I read a thing I think it was Brandon Sanderson, I'm not sure, that he said that every character should have a critical flaw, and it should be really specific.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be that his dad was an alcoholic and therefore he doesn't like alcohol. It should be his dad was an alcoholic and always liked to drink whiskey, so that's the only drink that he won't drink, and therefore it makes him act a certain way in a scene, or that kind of thing. So I will usually write down some base characteristics of that character then, and what they want from the scene and their mood going into the scene. And that's when a lot of the characterization will layer on for me the second time around, because sometimes I miss the nuances that like bring out the voice when I do my first pass.
Yeah, Farda and Ella is so good, man. You did an excellent job at their dynamics, seriously.
I love that. I love that because I think it's one of the less enjoyed storylines in the first book, just because I think, again, Brandon Sanderson, I watched all his lectures on YouTube.
Oh, they're so good, man.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
Anyone, and that's anyone watching this who wants to be a writer of any level, go and look at them. They're the top level. He boils characterization down to 3 toggles of likability, proactivity, and proficiency. And I use them all the time. So like when I went into writing Ella for the second book, what I did is I looked at her and I said, okay, now she's likable. She's perfectly nice, and you know she's quite proficient. You know she's a bit sarky and she can handle herself, but she hasn't really had to yet. But she's kind of drifting through the first story. So how do I make her a more enjoyable character in the second story? I take her proactivity and I drive it all the way to the top. And then all of a sudden now she makes things happen herself, and she's a character you can relate to more. I think that was a big shift in her. She was very passive in the first book, and her proficiency and her proactivity go up in the second book. And I think for me, that was something I enjoyed like digging into. And
I think it kind of reflects in the reader's opinion as well, because a lot of readers kind of agree that her story improves so much in the second book.
Yep. No, it definitely does. But I think without the grounding of the first book, and that's the thing sometimes, if I had have driven her right up from the first book, she'd have nowhere to go.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So it's a trade-off. It really is.
And I think that's also why sometimes it is important to remember that sometimes a series needs more than one book to become good. I know
it depends on the series, on what you're trying to get from the series.
Yeah.
But I think like if you have a small, for instance, like again back to John Gwynne, Hunger of the Gods and Shadow of the Gods. Shadow of the Gods would be a great book just as a standalone, because he only has 4 major points of view. He can really focus on characterization, and it's just rich straight away. And you could do it in one book.
Yeah.
Or I'm happy we're getting more than one book, but you
Yeah.
can do it. But I think with bigger casts of characters, you do have to wait for that payoff a little bit.
Like The Faithful and the Fallen is a great example of this because Malice has more POV and it's kind of took off in the second book. And that's also like the things that I relate because that's why I mentioned John Gwynne in my review of your book.
Anytime anyone compares me to John Gwynne, and it's really funny because I know, not know, but I've chatted to Will a little bit, his son, and it's that funny thing where I'll say, oh, you know, and your dad's actually a massive inspiration. He's like, that's weird to hear. Oh, great.
That's weird.
Because when we were talking at first, he was referring to his dad as Gwyn, like as in as like Sanderson, and then I pointed it out, and he was like, I didn't actually realize I was doing that. But yeah, no.
So with all these threads, with all this plotline, all these characters, you're putting yourself on a deadline. It's kind of like you become a traditionally published author here. Do you ever, do you have plans, let's say, I don't know, someday maybe to move to traditional publish? I mean, considering how successful you are now, I only assume and I wish that you will be more successful in the future. And so will you move to traditionally publish?
I don't know, move to traditionally publish. I think I will always have indie books. I think like the series to me, this is a passion for me. And like I said, with the novellas don't earn me loads of money, but I love these books. So I want to write them for readers. I think I wouldn't say no for future series to be acquired, because I think even just from a business perspective, like that diversifying your income is important. Having income from traditionally published books and having income from independent books, it just means that you're less likely to run into trouble if something happens. But I think, it would depend. It would probably take a bit for me to move over, just because I enjoy what I'm doing, and I love a lot of the aspects of independent publishing.
There's a lot of freedom too, right?
Yeah. There is, like, there's small things that, like, I was talking to a traditionally published author the other day. I'm not going to mention his name in case I say something rude. We're talking about like conventions, and say for instance he would have gotten over to one of the conventions, and there's loads of traditionally published authors. They're treated really well, and they're given like guest passes and taken around the place. But indie authors they're just not given it. And you won't get that even if you've sold 1 million books. You just won't get it. So there are just things, and like being in bookstores and things that you kind of dream about when you're a kid. I'd love to walk into a bookstore and see my books there. That at the minute is only really achievable through traditional publishing. And
it is a shame.
There's a lot of I know, but it's one of those, and it's an interesting debate that I won't bring up because it's a bit of a can of worms. But people talk about, I saw a thread on Twitter earlier today, and they were talking about Amazon. Amazon hates authors, and it's like, which is absolutely untrue. And the logic that people use, it's funny because they'll say, you know, they give you 75% of royalties over when your book is over $2.99, but they only give you 35% of royalties when it's below 99 cents. But that's not because they hate authors. It's because they want authors to drive their price point up to $2.99. But the reality is, if you actually look at it, it's the actual brick and mortar bookstores that trash authors, because if I want to get to an independent bookstore, I have to set a wholesale discount of my books to 55%. So they get 55% off the retail price of the book. And that's on top of the portion my distributor takes. But on top of that as well, there's a big argument about returns at the minute on Twitter. Always people are returning ebooks. But if you want to get an independent bookstore or any bookstore as an author, you have to set returns on. And what that means is sometimes up to 2 or 3 years after bookstores purchase your books, they are able to return them to you for full cost. And either you give them all the money back and they destroy the books, or you give them all the money back and then you pay out of your own pocket to have the book shipped back to you. And that's even if they're damaged. So I have to make the choice to not be in bookstores. So I have to turn my returns off. And the difference as well is if I give that wholesale discount, in order for me to turn even $1 profit on my books, I'd have to charge about £35 per hardback.
Damn.
So it's one of those things where it's perception and how people view Amazon as this big horrible company. But the reality is, if Amazon hadn't have started KDP and this huge field of independent publishing, I wouldn't be an author right now.
Yeah, definitely. Kindle Unlimited opened a lot of paths, man. Kindle Unlimited is insane.
Yeah. Have you seen the global fund? Like the amount of money that Amazon put into it. If Amazon hadn't invested in the authors, the book scene would be totally different right now.
Yeah. Well,
it's incredible.
I think I have to thank Amazon for that one. I mean, without that, I won't be reading a lot of great self-published fantasy books in the first place.
I compare Amazon to Spotify all the time. Like Spotify give nothing to singers and songwriters. Amazon, the royalty rates you get from Amazon are very healthy. They're good.
Yeah. I mean, they're not flawless, but come on,
no. There's 100 million ways they can improve.
But
they're not malicious. They're not trying to hurt authors. It's the exact opposite. You're a product to Amazon. So the better you sell, the more money they make. So they want you to do well.
You are the product. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. That's the way it works. It's a bit sad to think about it like that. But
Well, it's kind of the same. I mean, I'm the product of YouTube too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When people talk about algorithms and the algorithm, the mystical algorithm, it generally is just, Amazon will naturally give organic views and reach to things that sell well. But the reality is what people forget is things like your book page. Amazon look at conversion. So Amazon will push your book. If 1,000 people land on your page and of those 1,000 people, 100 people buy the book, they will push your book more than the book page where 1,000 people land and 10 people buy the book.
Crazy. And speaking of traditional published versus self-published, probably one of the benefits when it comes to traditional publishing is that there are illustrated edition and special edition. And I mean, self-published fantasy authors are kind of like doing it now through Kickstarters, and there is a lot of gorgeous self-published edition. Do you have any plan to make kind of special edition someday?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. And there's some top secret plans. I had initially thought I love Kickstarters, and the reason I love Kickstarters is because they're really interactive. I think they're great. I think that's the reason Brandon Sanderson's did so well, besides Brandon Sanderson, is because well, part of the game was watching the money tick up. People would go onto the page just to see that tick up, and that level of interactivity pushes it up more. And it's part of how Kickstarter works. It's part of the reason why it works so well. I would have loved to do a Kickstarter, but I kind of felt personally that I didn't want to run a Kickstarter until I finished the series, because I don't think it's right for me. I don't think authors owe readers anything, and readers don't owe authors anything. But I do love my readers. And when I say love, I mean in a passionate sense that I have my Discord server and I get emails, and I love when readers are really passionate about fantasy and really love the series. And so I love to give that back. It's a two-way street. And I think I wouldn't feel right if I took time away from writing the series. And Kickstarters are extensive time. If I took time away to do a special edition of book 1, but book 3 and 4 weren't out yet, it wouldn't sit too well with me.
I know.
If there was a way to do it quicker without it taking a lot of my time, I would go for it. But I think at the minute, for something like a Kickstarter, even though I'd love to do it, I kind of want to wait until I've given this series to the world first, and then try and do something a bit more special.
Or you can become Brandon Sanderson.
That would be great. That'd be great. Yeah. Don't know that will ever happen for anyone else ever. He's a unique egg.
Yeah. He's crazy.
Yes.
Well, I definitely will look forward to that special edition. I mean, even this one already has great interior artworks from your brother, Aaron Cahill. Yeah, he did a great job, especially one with the art. And I'm going to show it now because I really love this one. It's the Akiran Hall one.
Oh, yeah. That's so good. I love the ones in the Exile hardback.
Belina?
The one of Belina is amazing. Like, it is just stunning.
This one. See? So for those of you who want to get the physical copy, look at this. It's so beautiful.
I really like that one.
Yeah, I love this one. This is probably my favorite so far for your books.
And that was the thing for me. I think being indie allows you to do is that I said, I know that indie hardbacks, they cost more than traditional ones, and it's just the economy of scale. Is the more books you print, the cheaper per unit they are, and because you have to print on demand, unless you have a storage unit in your warehouse as an indie author that will hold 2,000 copies, you have to print on demand, and it just means that the unit cost to make them is more expensive. So I said to myself, if I do it, I want to add as much value as I possibly can. I want to have the interior artworks that you wouldn't usually see in traditionally published, traditionally. You do obviously have illustrated editions, but when you do that, it goes into an extra money. But to have some extra things, the chapter icons, the illustrations, the map, and the kind of the naked hardcover and stuff, I kind of wanted to add just those little bits to make it a bit more worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it worked. we love interior artworks.
I love the way you can say "we" as in the whole reader community, but you're also right.
Yeah, I'm speaking. This is fact. This is not opinion, okay?
Yeah, no, done. Petrik doesn't give opinions; he gives facts.
Oh, well, I've taken a lot of your time now, and now I'm going just to say and ask the last question. So what's your plan for the series? How many books? I think you remember, I remember that you said it was going to be 4 books at first, but I think you have changed that, right?
It was always kind of initially planned as like a 5 to 6 book series.
Oh, 5 to 6 books. Okay.
That was the idea. And I think for me, it depends on book 4. So
okay.
I will not make the series any longer than it has to be. I'm adamant about that. It's something that I try to do in my storytelling as well. Of Darkness and Light is a much bigger book than A Blood and Fire. But it's not bigger because there's a lot of excess information. It's bigger because there's more characters, more points of view, more threads. So I try to be as economical with the storytelling as I can. And that's the same with the series. I don't want to stretch it on past what it needs to be. Yeah. So I think in book 4, I'll have a much better idea, because ideas can expand as you write. I'll have a much better idea of what I need to tell the end of the story that I want to tell.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm saying 5 to 6. I think it would almost definitely be 5. And there's just a few things that, depending on how they work, could be 6.
Yeah, and
but so I think it's a challenge for me to try. I want to try and finish it in 5.
Yeah, and so if it is 5 books, let's say it is 5 books, you plan to finish it next year?
So that was the plan. But what I think, it might push a little bit later. So it depends. I initially planned on releasing this kind of August time this year of War and Ruin, and then book 4 in maybe June next year. And then book 5 in December. But I think I'm going to push those deadlines out a bit, just to give myself some mental breathing space.
Yeah. You need it, man.
Yeah, I think it'll result in better books.
Yeah.
On the main thing, because I think this year I moved continent, I got engaged, bought a house, huge, massive, life-changing things, switched careers. Yeah. So I've gotten a bit delayed in what I was hoping on, but it's still a pretty quick pace. It will still be 2 books released last year, 2 books released this year. So we have actually 3 books released last year, 2 books released this year.
And right now, Of War and Ruin is slated for December, right? Yeah.
There's always the chance, depending on if life happens, that I might have to push it out. I think Amazon allows you to push a pre-order for about 30 days. And there's always a chance that could happen, but I'm really hoping that I should have it all in place and good to go. It's only the size of the book that's going to make it a problem.
Well, I certainly wish you the best of luck. I am looking forward to Of War and Ruin, and this time I will read the ARC edition.
It only took 4 books to convince you.
Yeah. Look, so many review requests, man. Even right now, speaking, I already got 3 now.
Petrik, I don't even know where you put the books. Like, where do they go?
Look, there's no space.
Because you can't. If we find out that you're using them for firewood, there's going to be a problem. Because I can't see you have to have rented a warehouse at this stage.
It's kind of crazy because I remember 2 or 3 authors actually said that to me. Did you use my books as a firewood?
Oh, God.
Of course not.
I just use them to hold other books. Oh man.
Oh man, but yeah, really, I'm really thankful that a lot of self-published authors and traditional published authors are giving me books to read. It means a lot, especially because I live in Indonesia, and yeah, come on.
But you read them, like you do read them, and that's the thing. Like even I know it might have taken you were fantastic in saying yes to my request, because I obviously reached out to you. I told you a bit about my series. I compared it to things that I know you liked.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even released yet. You didn't even, have that kind of idea. And then as it went on, you did make time and space for it. And there was so many books coming in. And, it was just, I knew that if I just sat there and left it, eventually at some stage, you'd come around to it. And that's the whole point.
And I'm always thankful for authors who act like that. I mean, yeah, I don't think I need to say anything else on this, but yeah,
no,
it means a lot.
It's the basic thing we said earlier. No reader has an obligation to an author. No author has an obligation to a reader. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. You love creating books, or I love creating books. You love reading books.
Yeah.
And hopefully by you reading my books, that I'm able to create more books, and then you can read more.
Certainly.
And reading is meant to be for fun. Like I write these books because I love the world, and I love telling the stories, and I want people to read the stories. And I wouldn't ever want someone to feel pressure to read a book, because you're not going to enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
The whole point of writing the story is, for a reader to love it and want to read more. And
sometimes it really depends on reading mood. I mean, I didn't plan to read The Exile immediately after Of Darkness and Light, but after reading it, you know what? I just got
that was quite funny. That was quite funny, because I knew you said you're going to start reading it, but then they get the message the next day. Oh no, I'm done. Okay. Because it's a novella, but it's not a small novella. Like it's still a fair amount of reading time.
Yeah, it's almost 200 pages. So yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I have with Ryan Cahill for today. Seriously, it means a lot, Ryan, for you to visit my channel. And
it means a lot for you to have Jesus. My English sometimes just disappears. It means a lot for me. For me, it means a lot for you to have me on. I still didn't work.
Yeah,
it doesn't work. That's what the editing is for.
Mm-hmm. I wish you the best of luck in writing Of War and Ruin. And
thank you.
For those of you who are watching this, seriously, if you haven't checked out these books, I highly recommend it. It is a great classic fantasy told with a modern narrative. And also, if you're afraid of forgetting things, well, thankfully Ryan has done a wise decision in including the story so far of every book in the series. So yeah,
and it's only from Petrik constantly saying to me, you have to do this. You have to do this. And it was one of the hardest things. It's so hard to take this book that you felt needed to be 150, 200,000 words and condense it into 4 pages.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm very happy I did it. I think you're totally right. There's a few readers who said that to me, and I think, it's that idea that you can just jump back in. You don't have to go and reread. You don't have to worry about forgetting things. And
that's also the same for me. I mean, obviously, I forgot some things from the first book. Like I forgot Belina was there. I didn't even know she was there.
Well, I think, and this is, I know we're extending on, but I think it's a really useful tool that authors aren't using, because when you create it, you can steer a reader's memory.
Yeah.
You can pick things for them to remember.
Yeah.
So it's a tool. It's a narrative tool.
Yeah.
So
it helps a lot, because if I didn't have that section, I don't think I would have enjoyed Of Darkness and Light this much. Yeah, it helps a lot. It really sparked memories of reading of Blood and Fire so much. So yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, that's all I have to say really regarding this. And seriously, thank you so much, Ryan, for visiting this channel. It means a lot to me, and I wish you the best of luck in writing Of War and Ruin.
Thanks for having me, Petrik.
Yeah. Bye-bye.